The topic we'll cover is scope management, the processes that ensure the project includes all the work required, and only the work required, to complete the project successfully. In Waterfall, scope is defined up front, baselined, and tightly controlled throughout the project. This makes scope management one of the most critical areas because once scope is locked in, changes are difficult and costly. Scope management begins with collecting requirements. In Waterfall, this often involves extensive stakeholder interviews, workshops, surveys, and analysis to capture detailed requirements early in the project. The exam may test your understanding that requirements must be complete, measurable, and traceable. From here, you'll create the scope statement, which clearly defines what is in scope and what is out of scope. This document becomes the foundation for decision-making later when scope conflicts or change requests arise. The Work Breakdown Structure, or WBS, is another key artifact. The WBS decomposes the project scope into smaller, more manageable components called work packages. On the exam, remember that the WBS represents 100% of the project scope, nothing more, nothing less. Each work package can then be scheduled, costed, and tracked. Once requirements, the scope statement, and the WBS are approved, they form the scope baseline. This baseline is part of the overall project management plan, and it is what the PM monitors against during execution. Managing scope in Waterfall is about strict change control. Any request to add, modify, or remove scope must go through the integrated change control process and be reviewed by the change control board. This prevents scope creep, which is one of the biggest risks in Waterfall projects. Also, beware of gold plating, when the team delivers more than what's required. On the exam, both scope creep and gold plating are incorrect practices. Verification of scope happens during validate scope, where deliverables are formally accepted by stakeholders against the defined requirements. Controlling scope happens continuously through control scope, where the PM monitors work performance, compares it against the baseline, and addresses variances. For the PMP exam, remember that Waterfall scope management is about precision, documentation, and control. You'll need to know how requirements are collected, how the WBS is created, how the scope baseline is protected, and how scope verification and control are managed. Now we'll go through 10 practice questions that test your knowledge of requirements gathering, scope statements, the WBS, scope creep, and how scope is validated and controlled in Waterfall projects. Let's get into the first question in this topic. Question 21. A predictive IT project is in the initiation phase. The project manager is developing the scope management plan as part of the overall project management plan. A senior analyst asks if this plan should already include a detailed list of deliverables and WBS elements for tracking. How should the project manager respond? A. Yes, because defining detailed scope elements early reduces ambiguity during execution. B. No, the scope management plan defines how scope will be managed, not the scope itself. C. Yes, because scope must be baselined during initiation to ensure traceability. D. No, but the WBS dictionary should still be created alongside the scope management plan. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is B. This question tests your understanding of scope planning in predictive projects, specifically the purpose and timing of the scope management plan. It's important to distinguish between planning how scope will be defined, validated, and controlled versus actually defining scope itself. Choice B is the best option because the scope management plan outlines how scope will be handled throughout the project, including the processes for collecting requirements, defining scope, validating deliverables, and controlling changes. It does not contain the actual scope details. Choice A is incorrect. While reducing ambiguity is important, detailed deliverables and WBS elements come later, during defined scope, and create WBS, not during scope management plan development. Choice C is incorrect. The scope baseline is created during planning, not initiation, and only after requirements have been collected and scope defined. Choice D is incorrect. The WBS dictionary is part of the scope baseline. It is not developed during scope management plan creation. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 22. In a predictive project to design a new national ID registration platform, the project team is preparing to collect stakeholder requirements. Several stakeholders are unavailable for workshops, and a few have conflicting expectations. A senior systems analyst suggests finalizing scope based on previous project templates and technical specs instead of collecting new inputs. What should the project manager do? A. Proceed using historical documents to define scope, since stakeholder input is limited. B. Escalate to the sponsor to force stakeholder availability for scope discussions. C. Use available stakeholders and supplement with document analysis, surveys, or interviews. D. Delay planning until all stakeholders are available to ensure requirements are fully captured. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is C. This question tests your knowledge of how to collect requirements in predictive projects, especially when not all stakeholders are available. It focuses on using multiple data gathering techniques and continuing progress without delay while still capturing quality inputs. Choice C is the best option because PMI recommends using techniques such as document analysis, surveys, interviews, and engaging available stakeholders. These methods help bridge gaps in availability and still yield quality requirements without stalling the planning process. Choice A is incorrect. Relying only on historical documents and technical specs limits stakeholder engagement and risks misalignment with current project needs. Choice B is incorrect. Escalating to the sponsor too early is unnecessary. The PM has tools to manage the situation proactively without invoking hierarchy. Choice D is incorrect. Delaying the project for perfect stakeholder attendance is inefficient. Predictive methods encourage progress using structured data collection tools. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 23. While defining scope for a predictive public health program, the project manager consolidates approved requirements and creates a draft project scope statement. A government stakeholder insists that her department's needs were only partially addressed and demands that the PM incorporate the remaining items immediately. What should the project manager do? A. Include the stakeholder's remaining needs in the scope statement and baseline the full scope. B. Ask the stakeholder to submit a change request for the additional requirements. C. Document the concern, finalize the scope statement, and log the new items for future projects. D. Facilitate a review of the approved requirements to confirm alignment and consider next steps. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is D. This question tests your knowledge of the defined scope process, where the project manager translates approved requirements into a formal scope statement. It also evaluates your ability to handle last-minute input while maintaining stakeholder engagement and alignment with what was already approved. Choice D is the best option because it keeps the process on track while giving the stakeholder a voice. Reviewing the approved requirements together helps clarify whether there was a misunderstanding or misalignment and avoids rushing into unauthorized scope expansion. Choice A is incorrect. Including unapproved items at this stage risks scope creep and undermines the formal process used to build the scope baseline. Choice B is incorrect. Jumping directly to change control without reviewing what's already approved may escalate tension and doesn't foster collaboration. Choice C is incorrect. Finalizing the scope and logging concerns without review might dismiss a legitimate gap and damage stakeholder trust. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 24. A predictive project to implement a national payroll system is in the planning phase. During WBS development, a new team member asks if resources and timelines should be assigned to each work package to support schedule creation. What should the project manager do? A. Confirm that resources and duration estimates must be included in the WBS to ensure bottom-up scheduling. B. Explain that the WBS defines deliverables and resource planning is a separate process. C. Defer the question until the project schedule is developed, where these details will be captured. D. Add only high-level duration estimates to the WBS to guide resource allocation decisions. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is B. This question tests your understanding of the work breakdown structure, WBS, and how it fits into predictive planning. The WBS defines what needs to be delivered. It is not the place to assign resources or estimate time. Choice B is the best option because the WBS focuses on decomposing project deliverables into manageable work packages. Resource assignments and durations are addressed in separate processes during schedule and resource planning. Choice A is incorrect. Including resources and durations in the WBS mixes planning processes and violates PMI's structured approach to decomposition. Choice C is incorrect. Deferring the conversation misses an opportunity to clarify the team's understanding of planning tools. Choice D is incorrect. Even high-level durations don't belong in the WBS. It should remain focused on scope, not time or cost estimates. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 25. In a predictive infrastructure project nearing the end of a major phase, the project team submits completed deliverables to stakeholders. One department head refuses to sign off, citing minor visual discrepancies that do not affect functionality or contractual requirements. The project manager confirms that all quality standards have been met. What should the project manager do next? A. Revise the deliverables to satisfy the department head and ensure buy-in. B. Meet with the department head to discuss the concerns and try to resolve the issue. C. Proceed with validate scope to formally document stakeholder acceptance or rejection. D. Request a change order to address the discrepancies before continuing the process. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is C. This question tests your understanding of the validate scope process in a predictive environment. Once deliverables are completed and quality verified, the project manager must seek formal acceptance from stakeholders, even if minor disagreements remain. Choice C is the best option because it follows the prescribed process. Conduct validate scope to formally capture whether deliverables are accepted or rejected. This ensures transparency, traceability, and project governance. Choice A is incorrect. Making unapproved changes to satisfy individual preferences, especially when the deliverable meets scope and quality criteria, can lead to scope creep and set a poor precedent. Choice B is incorrect. While discussion is important, it should happen within the validate scope process to ensure proper documentation and formal closure. Choice D is incorrect. Initiating a change order for cosmetic concerns not tied to baseline requirements is unnecessary and adds administrative burden without value. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 26. During a predictive project to build a regional operations center, the client casually asks the project manager to add soundproofing panels to the server room, an item not included in the original requirements. The PM agrees, thinking it's a minor change that improves quality and won't affect the budget or timeline. What is the most appropriate course of action? A. Decline the request unless it's submitted through the formal change control process. B. Proceed with the change as it enhances quality and has no impact on cost or schedule. C. Document the client's verbal request and add it to the punch list for implementation. D. Instruct the team to install the panels and update the requirements documentation afterward. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is A. This question tests your understanding of how to control scope in predictive projects. Even small changes, if not approved through formal processes, result in scope creep, which threatens the integrity of the baseline. Choice A is the best option because in waterfall environments, any change to scope, regardless of size or intent, must go through integrated change control. This preserves traceability, transparency, and sponsor alignment. Choice B is incorrect. Even if a change seems harmless, making it without approval violates the change management process and opens the door for uncontrolled scope growth. Choice C is incorrect. A verbal request does not substitute for a formal change request. Adding items informally to a punch list undermines governance. Choice D is incorrect. Updating documents after work is done does not prevent scope creep, it enables it and bypasses control procedures. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 27. During a predictive project to implement a national emergency alert system, a senior tester asks for a copy of the requirements traceability matrix. The project manager is surprised, noting that testing hasn't started yet and the RTM is still under internal review. What is the most appropriate response from the project manager? A. Postpone sharing the RTM until execution begins to avoid confusion. B. Share the current RTM to support early test planning and validation. C. Direct the tester to wait until formal test cases are approved. D. Explain that the RTM is used for stakeholder sign-off, not for team-level activities like testing. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is B. This question tests your understanding of the Requirements Traceability Matrix, RTM, in predictive projects. The RTM is a valuable planning tool, not just for requirement validation, but also for early alignment between deliverables and test criteria. Choice B is the best option because sharing the RTM early allows the testing team to prepare, align test plans with requirements, and ensure full traceability. This promotes proactive quality assurance and helps reduce risk later. Choice A is incorrect. Withholding the RTM delays critical planning and may lead to missed requirements or late defect discovery. Choice C is incorrect. Waiting for test case approval is too late in predictive projects. Early traceability is key to effective scope validation and quality planning. Choice D is incorrect. The RTM is not only for stakeholder sign-off, it's also used internally by teams to validate, test, and trace requirements to deliverables. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 28. A predictive project is developing a high-security access control system. A key stakeholder requests that facial recognition be added to the device's authentication features. The project manager confirms that the new feature aligns with market trends but would require additional design, hardware, and testing work. What does this request represent? A. A change to project scope, as it alters the work required to deliver the product. B. A change to product scope since it modifies system features and user functionality. C. A risk to scope baseline, requiring contingency planning and issue tracking. D. A stakeholder communication gap, as the feature should have been discussed earlier. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is B. This question tests your understanding of the difference between product scope and project scope. In predictive environments, it's critical to identify whether a requested change affects what is being delivered versus how it's being delivered. Choice B is the best option because the stakeholder's request directly changes the features of the product, specifically the functionality of the access system. This is a textbook example of a change to product scope. Choice A is incorrect. While the change may eventually impact project scope, the initial change request is focused on product features, not the project activities themselves. Choice C is incorrect. This is not a risk or an issue to be tracked. It's a proposed scope change that should go through formal evaluation. Choice D is incorrect. The fact that it wasn't discussed earlier doesn't change how it should be categorized. It's still a change to product scope, not a communication gap. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 29. In a predictive project to develop an air traffic management tool, early planning defines major deliverables and interfaces. As technical teams begin detailed design, new dependencies emerge between modules. The project manager decides to update several work package definitions and refine certain estimates to reflect the additional clarity without modifying the scope baseline. How should this approach be described? A. Gold plating, as the PM is enhancing deliverables beyond the original agreement. B. Scope creep, because changes are being introduced during design. C. Progressive elaboration, since detail increases as planning evolves. D. Integrated change control, because estimates are being modified. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is C. This question tests your understanding of progressive elaboration in predictive project management. Even in plan-driven environments, some level of detail emerges over time as teams break down deliverables and refine planning outputs. Choice C is the best option because progressive elaboration is the process of adding detail to the plan as more information becomes available. The key is that this does not change the scope baseline. It simply enhances clarity within approved boundaries. Choice A is incorrect. Gold plating refers to adding extra features or enhancements not approved. That's not the case here. Choice B is incorrect. Scope creep means adding unauthorized work. In this scenario, the scope baseline remains unchanged. Choice D is incorrect. Integrated change control applies to formal changes to baselines, which isn't happening here. The PM is refining details, not initiating a change. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 30. A predictive project to deliver a regulatory reporting platform is nearing completion. During final testing, a senior developer adds a customizable dashboard feature that was not in the original requirements but believes it will improve user satisfaction. The client is pleased and asks for similar enhancements in future phases. How should the project manager address this situation? A. Thank the developer and log the client's positive response as a success. B. Accept the feature since it adds value and did not impact the schedule. C. Initiate a change request to update the baseline before project closure. D. Treat it as gold plating and reinforce adherence to defined requirements. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is D. This question tests your ability to recognize gold plating, the addition of extra features not approved or requested, and understand why it's discouraged in predictive project management, even though it may be acceptable at your workplace. Choice D is the best option because the developer introduced functionality that was not part of the baseline. Even though it was well-intentioned and the client liked it, the addition violates scope discipline. PMI considers gold plating risky because it can lead to stakeholder confusion, inconsistent delivery, and increased risk. Choice A is incorrect. Positive feedback does not justify bypassing scope controls. This sets a bad precedent. Choice B is incorrect. Adding features without approval, even if there's no impact to time or cost, undermines project governance. Choice C is incorrect. The change has already been implemented. A change request should have been submitted before the work was performed. Congratulations on reaching the end of scope management in Waterfall projects. You're now 30 questions into your PMP journey, a fantastic milestone on the road to exam readiness. Let's keep the momentum going, and I will see you in the next video.